I want to be holding a cup of coffee too. Hang on a second, folks. We're going to stop the tape and I'm going to get my cup of coffee so we match.
Good morning.
This coffee's cold. Doesn't
Mine's
matter.
hot.
It looks good for aesthetics. Smokey Bear help prevent forest fires. Okay, and we are broadcasting live from California. Funny enough, the land of copious forest fires. The whole state is in the middle of a mega drought. Conserve water. So last night we stayed up until midnight after the kids were asleep, and we watched a 1992 Richard Donner film. Now, usually when you think of Richard Donner, you think of this movie series, or you think of The Goonies. I had stumbled across this movie on VHS at the thrift shop a couple of days ago for a quarter. Figured I'd check it out. Radio Flyer, starring Elijah Wood and that kid from the Jurassic Park movie, which I think came out the year after this. And this movie is not, I don't want to say, would you say it's a coming of age movie? I don't know. Maybe in part.
I don't know.
So it's rated PG-13. It is 114 minutes long, so almost 2 hours. We got screaming infants in the background. We're going to stop the camera really quick. We'll be right back. Lorraine Bracco from Medicine Man and Goodfellas, John Hurd, Home Alone and Awakenings, yep, and Oscar-winning Ben Johnson, Best Supporting Actor, The Last Picture Show, which I have on DVD, but I have yet to watch, starring this moving story of a family torn apart by violence, healed by imagination. So that's basically the summary of the movie per the box. But what happens in the movie is, I had a friend say that this was one of her favorite movies growing up as a kid. Definitely not a movie that I would let my child watch. It is disturbing. And it only got like 35% reviews on Rotten Tomato and like 3 out of 10 on IMDb. I think it's worth more than that. I love period films. The movie takes place in the late 1960s, and I feel like they did a really good job catching that point of time. But I feel like the whole narration vibe, if you think it's like kind of playing off of like Stand By Me, came out in 1986, a couple of years before this movie, and then The Sandlot came out the year after this, also kind of like a coming of age period film with narration. It's just a very depressing movie. And Tom Hanks is in it, which was very surprising. I did not expect it, and because I didn't do any research before, I bought it because the box looked cool and I liked the description on the back. Popped it in. There you go. Tell me your thoughts about this movie.
Well, Tom Hanks does the narration because he's telling the story of his childhood to his two boys. So whenever his voice pops on, it makes you feel more reassured. And, you know, he has that soothing voice that only Tom Hanks has.
Yeah.
So that's comforting.
America's actor.
Exactly. And Elijah Wood is really good in it. Actually, the younger brother, that kid,
The
is
kid
really
from
good
Jurassic
in it
Park?
too. Yeah. The brotherly bond is really sweet, and seeing their little imaginations is really sweet, but it's just depressing because the stepdad is abusive and he mostly beats on the younger kid, which kind of doesn't make sense why he picks on him and not the Elijah Wood character, because they're really close in age. Elijah Wood doesn't seem to be that much older than the younger kid.
Or that much bigger either.
No, and he mostly beats on the younger kid, and it's really depressing. Like, I don't know. It stirred up a lot of feelings of anger, frustration. You want to reach through the TV and just like
and the mom,
pummel this guy because he's terrible.
The mom is like oblivious to the fact that her kid is being pummeled. There's like one scene where they like lift up the kid's shirt and his back is just black and blue, and the mom somehow is oblivious to her kid being beaten by this new stepdad. The mom's like
always at work. There's this one scene where they're like, okay, the mom's gonna take on all these late shifts, and then she's just never around anymore. But I said to my husband, doesn't she still ever give her kid a bath? Like,
Yeah,
you
there's
can't
one
tell that
scene
your
where
kid is
they kind of
beaten up
answer
on
that
his back.
question where there's one scene where the mom wants to give the kid a bath and then like the other brother like distracts her so she doesn't see him and then she just gets frustrated and leaves the room.
Okay, I must have not seen that part.
There,
'cause
this review, if you're watching to this point, there is spoilers. We're going to talk about the ending and then kind of talk about philosophies on what the whole thing, the whole outcome is. So the kids build, like the brother and the other brother, Mikey and Bobby, they build this creation in their shed that's like a flying machine out of a radio flyer and a lawnmower engine and a bunch of like random junk they get from a junkyard.
And the dad's motorcycle.
The stepdad, they pick parts from the motorcycle
mirrors.
of the step.
Which, if you have an abusive dad,
why would you do
try
something?
not to do more stuff to upset him, will ya?
Yeah, like the kid. This movie was so frustrating because it's like they know the guy is a beater, and they know he gets upset because he comes home and drinks like an entire 6-pack of beer and more, and then they still do things like they make this pressure cooker explosion. It's like, why would they do that? Cause it's like, I don't know. It frustrated me. The things the character, when you're watching a movie, the characters frustrate you and drive you nuts. These kids just drove me nuts sometimes. It's like, why, kid? You're gonna get your rear end beat.
Yeah,
don't do this thing.
He beats the kid with this like cord, so they have the bright idea. They're like, oh, we'll just put that cord away, so
they hide it in the oven.
The kid doesn't get as bad of a beating. Yeah, and I'm like, that thing's gonna catch on fire.
Sure enough,
that's gonna melt.
Later on, the stepdad turns the oven on, and the electrical cord gets all melted, and then like
he's all mad, and he's like,
We're gonna stop here for just a second, folks. Technical difficulties. So where were we?
He puts the cords in. Oh
yeah. So this stepfather, I didn't like how like they would like go out of their way to like not show the face of the stepfather, but then all of a sudden like you did see his face, and it was just kind of like, it was like they made a point throughout the whole movie where you never really saw the stepfather's face. He was all just kind of like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then at the very end you see him, but whatever, I don't know. It was just kind of annoying how they weren't consistent with that. They also the stepfather also makes the kids refer to him as the king. Elvis has left the building. Anyway, weird. So very odd. And the mom, she's just kind of oblivious. So we get to the end of the movie, and they're going to go fly this thing off of this crazy hill in Novato, California, which is in the Bay Area, a suburb of the Bay Area. And the kid just flies off into the sunset. And
the younger kid.
They're like, oh, the Mikey Elijah Wood character that would grow up to be the Tom Hanks character. Then it goes back to the modern time where like Tom Hanks is telling his kids, and he's like, oh yeah, like my brother flew off into the sunset and was safe, and we got postcards and letters from him. And then he kind of like makes this remark, and this is where I'm like struggling. He makes this remark where, and you read on a lot of forums online, there's like all these theories of like what really happened to Bobby. And he's like, oh yeah, the history is basically how you want to remember it. And that kind of leaves this gray area where like I want to ask you guys in the comments if you've seen this movie, like what you think.
Yeah, he says something to the effect of like the story is like up to the teller to decide or
how it ends.
So, but he did say, yeah, Bobby went on to be this flyer, and there were these marks on this map,
where he'd flown all over the world.
Where he supposedly went all these different places, but it made it seem like he was dead. How he was talking about him, like, yeah, he did this and he did that, like.
And then there was,
it seemed like he wasn't around anymore.
And there was that really random dream sequence where that buffalo comes and talks to him, which I thought it was cute, but
that crying buffalo.
my wife did not really appreciate that.
It was just kind of random how you were like living in reality, and like everything kind of made sense, like with what would really happen, and then all of a sudden that kid saw that, well, it was an image that he had seen earlier of this crying buffalo that was alone. So I know why it popped up in his dream again, like it makes sense, but it just was weird how all of a sudden, and then with the 80s imagery that they had, the kind of 1980s technology, it just was a little hokey. So I was like, all right, what's going on right now? It was just surprising to see this giant buffalo crying in their bedroom all of a sudden. But basically the buffalo was warning him that the younger brother had the answers and that he needed to stick up for him and stuff. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It ended a lot different than I was expecting.
We'll be right back, folks.
It seems like almost a little unbelievable how not only did they have the abusive stepdad, but then the kids, this was what was kind of inconsistent. The kids in the neighborhood just all of a sudden, like with no build up to it, just randomly started like bullying them.
Like a large group, like over 10 kids.
Were attacking them.
It's like you already have one really high stress storyline where the kid's getting beaten by this stepdad, and then they move to a new neighborhood, and every single neighborhood kid gangs up on these two kids.
Yeah, the stepdad like threw all their clothes outside, so they were like, oh, we got to clean this up before the mom comes home.
And then all the neighborhood kids just happen to roll up at that time, and they're like, we're gonna kick some ass.
Yeah, and they just start beating on these kids, and they're all young, and then thankfully this sheriff stops by.
He's like the dad from Home Alone
in the movie
plays the local sheriff,
and he's like, all right, he chases off all the bullies, and they're screaming, we'll be back, and then he's like, do you kids need help? I was like, oh my gosh, yes, please. This is stressful.
So what do you think, folks? Was Bobby a figment of Mikey's imagination?
No, he was real.
I don't know. One person suggested that on a web page. I don't know, bulletin board. Another one's like, oh, well, Oh, it reminds me of that movie with Shailene Woodley where they're on her and her fiance are on that sailing boat yacht, and
what
then
was that movie called again?
Don't remember. I wish I knew. Maybe.
Adrift.
I think. So
yeah.
Anyway, like in that movie, you think that her boyfriend like survives with her until the very end, and then it turns out like he was gone the whole time, and she just created
Spoiler
him.
alert! Hope you haven't.
We're ruining so many movies for so many people if they just wanted to tune in.
Whoops.
But we think if you're watching this video, you probably saw it too, and you want to hear what other people thought. So like in that movie with Shailene Woodley, her boyfriend drowns right away, but then throughout the entire movie, he's there with her in this really injured state, keeping her alive as she like nurses him until
he doesn't completely die when he drowns.
Yeah.
He
so anyway,
gets injured or whatever.
It's
then
kind of along the same vein.
Out he's not real.
Does Mikey create Bobby, and Bobby was never really there?
I think I would have liked the movie better if they made it more like clear at the end. Like they should have just found the younger brother Bobby in the little flyer and taken him home, lock up that psycho stepdad, and then I would have loved it if the mom and the sheriff got
Not
together.
all movies have happy endings, honey.
But that was a little predictable, I guess.
It would have been.
It would have been. The sheriff was going to save the day,
so
and the mom was going to marry the sheriff. But that didn't happen.
At the very beginning of the movie, it starts off in 1962, where you see a neighborhood kid try to jump his bike off the top of the roof of the barn that they later on in the movie fly off this flying machine, and that kid falls to his demise and gets severely injured, and later on in the movie he reappears as a gas station attendant walking with a bad limp. It would have been realistic if that flying machine would have hit that air and just fallen to the ground, and the Bobby kid would have met his end. But I don't know. Kids create their own scenarios. So what do you get?
He should have just landed on a hill, like down at the bottom, and then the mom and the sheriff could have found him. Then the mom and the sheriff look at each other like, yeah.
I feel like the director
and then the mom and the sheriff get married.
I feel like the director left the movie open-ended so then like people could have these types of discussions, like you create whatever scenario you wanted to happen. Did Bobby fly off into the sunset and this fantasy?
Oh, this was the other part that didn't make sense. So the Bobby kid is just gone, and the mom's screaming at the older kid, like Mikey. She's like, "Where's Bobby? Where's Bobby?" And he's like, he's gone. He's safe now. And then it makes it seem in the movie like a week later or so.
They get a postcard and he's like, hey, I'm at that buffalo ranch. Yeah. I'm happy and everything's all right.
At the beginning. But it was in his little kid handwriting, so it made it seem like not that much time had passed.
But
like
then later on,
5 years old or whatever.
the Tom Hanks character is like an older kid, and he's still getting letters from Bobby from around the world, theoretically. So what do you guys think happened? Do you think Bobby was a figment of Mikey's imagination?
Did he go die? Live at that ranch?
Did he fly off into the sunset?
With that old man?
What do you guys think? Comment down below.
Did that... Oh my gosh, the dog part too. I was dying at the dog part.
Yeah.
I don't know how I went to sleep last night. When that guy beat that dog and I thought that dog was dead, oh my God, so much anxiety. I didn't need that anxiety after 2020.
You know what the moral?
I'm telling you,
know
I
what
really
the
didn't.
you know what the moral of the story is?
Don't watch movies late at night that are about abuse.
Don't drink.
Don't
Stay
drink.
away from liquor, beer, and wine.
Don't make your hobby getting drunk in your garage.
And don't
Find a different
don't
hobby.
pick a bad significant other. Be very thorough in your vetting process.
Be a
Don't
good picker.
settle.
That's right. Don't settle.
Until next time. This has been another episode of Corey's Video Corner.
And me too. Sometimes.
And sometimes special guests.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.